Hello everyone, I'm Dan, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the work I've been doing on Fusion's documentation. So, just before we start, I have had to reinstall OBS, so I am still working on getting everything up and running. If something's a bit off in this video, that's why. But yeah, so just to start off with, we are not looking at the new documentation right now. We are of course looking at ltob.github.io/fusion. This should be a very familiar site, right? So here you can see this is just a get started page on the tutorials, and it's all right? Like it's not the best documentation in the world. It's certainly not the worst. It looks quite nice, but substantially it is a bit lacking. It's like, this is not acceptable, and I appreciate that. What's even less acceptable is this. Absolutely, like, we shouldn't be doing this. And so I want to rectify this with version 0.2. So first things first, before 0.2 gets pushed, I do want to try my hand at versioning the docs. So I'm going to be using something called Mic to do this, hopefully. And the way it will work is that we'll take a snapshot of this version 0.1 website, and we will make it available for people looking for 0.1 APIs. Now, obviously, I am not going to recommend anyone at all stay on version 0.1. It is really not the best expression of Fusion by a long shot, but if you need to, it will be here. So with that out of the way, I have been doing some redesign work on these docs to make them work better, and I've also been doing lots of rewriting work in order to make them read better, and also to more comprehensively document Fusion in a much more sensible way. So with that being said, this is what the new docs look like. This is obviously just a first glance. Let me just clear the search box so you get a better idea. So yeah, you immediately notice a few obvious changes. The first big change is that we have added more negative space to the page. Now, this is not us being trendy and, designy minimally. This is actually more of a practical reason, right? So at smaller display sizes, you will notice it does not completely change or anything. Like, this all looks almost the same as it does now, but as you move to more ultra-wide screen sizes, you get more space. The reason why is because with the previous documentation, everything being squished in the middle made it a bit harder to focus on the content, and it looked a bit messier, right? So, I mean, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was drawing attention away from the actual docs, which was not fantastic. So it has been a real emphasis on de-emphasizing non-important parts of the page. So you notice we've gotten rid of the two-tone background. That's just so that doesn't become a distraction. It looked cool, but I am willing to axe it in favor of better reading experience. And this stuff being pushed away to the side means that the documentation itself is much more cleanly separated. It's easier to focus on. We did still keep the glass effect though, because that is just a really cool effect. We did a little bit of trickery in order to get it to render a bit better as well. And yeah, so moving down this page, you obviously notice this title up here looks a bit different. We have actually, we've revisited the typography there. We scaled the icon down a bit to make it a bit less massive. But the other thing you'll notice is we have redone the installation instructions. So these installation instructions are now much more visual. So you notice you have insert from file highlighted here, fusion.rbxm. There was just a step-by-step, here's what you have to do, because some people were still getting confused by the installation instructions. Now, I'm not one to judge about that. You think what you want about that, whether the previous installation instructions were clear or not. That's for you to decide. For me, I decided it would be much better to just make it visual. The Roho steps, I mean, they're still de-emphasized and they're still much more technical, because if you're using Roho, you probably know what you're doing. Or at least I hope you do. And of course, you still have the regular setting up test script stuff. That's all good. And you'll notice again down at the bottom with the footer, we got rid of that two-tone effect just for cleanliness, and we also moved the next and previous buttons to line up with the actual documentation itself, not with the page width. So what that means is that these buttons will always be nice and easy to access, even if you're on a massive screen, right? And yeah, so that's most of what's on this page. Let's move on. I'm not going to go through most of these docs because they are heavily work in progress and I don't want to show them yet for that reason. But I am investigating a new structure for the tutorial pages, which is a bit less waffly. It's more like no bullshit, straight to the point. So this here, you can see values are objects which store single values. You can read from them with get and write to them with set. It's sort of like the introduction, perfectly expresses in minimal, concise language what this thing does. If you understand that TLDR, you can literally skim read the rest of the page, is sort of the theory. And if you don't understand it quite as much, we do have a dedicated usage section which goes properly into detail about that. But it's sort of like this sort of ramp between like, okay, here's like the really short, quick version for people who want that. Here's a slightly longer version if you're more interested in the actual details of it, if you need to understand it better. And then for some pages, we will also have a theoretical section underneath where we actually talk a bit more about the theory that this stuff is built upon so that you have a more full understanding of how it works rather than simply a it works understanding, right? And I think this page would be a good page to introduce the other new change that we've made to the documentation, which is light theme. So you might be flashbanged a bit here, so I'm sorry. But you can see here the light theme. This is supposedly more readable for some people. I personally think it just looks nice. I don't find much reading benefit in it, but some people do, and it's also a good thing to have for accessibility reasons and for user choice, so I'm willing to provide it. And you'll notice we are having a more two-tone thing going on here with the actual design. It's more consistent with Fusion's design language that way. And also it just kind of makes it easy to see where the code blocks are. So I sort of designed this as more of a high contrast sort of thing. So you'll notice here, instead of using the accent color, we are using black. So this is much more about contrast, this theme. That being said, the actual background text contrast here is not massive. So if we actually go back to the Get Started page, and we scroll down, you can actually see the light theme for the Fusion documentation is actually more of a grey theme. Like the GitHub white theme here is way brighter. And this is intentional. This is because pure white is kind of hard on the eyes, and I want this to be nice and easy to read. This is going to be a long form reading kind of website. So everything is nice and dim. The text is still quite dark, which means that it should still stand out very well, but the actual background is not just going to be blaring photons in your face, hopefully. And of course, all the images are theme responsive, and I have tried to match them down to the pixel. So yeah, every single image I am hoping to make theme responsive so that we can optimize how they look on the website. And yeah, we still have all this regular stuff. I think it is also worth mentioning if we move on to the observers page. So you'll see here that we only have a usage section. We do not have an actual theory section for this because not everything needs a theory section. At least that's my theory. So yeah, that's the idea behind that. Just quickly flicking over to the API reference, I haven't started working on this yet, but I will complete this. Obviously for version 0.2, this is very important to have completed. And you'll notice we still have all the classic pages here. I have put a lot of emphasis on making sure everything is largely backwards compatible with the version 0.1 docs, so I'm not just making everything a massive pain in the bum for me. But something else you might notice in some of these code samples is the code theme. We actually now have a dedicated sort of Fusion syntax highlighting sort of thing, which is inspired by the Fusion logo. It's got lots of purples, pinks, and oranges in it. So I think it looks quite nice. I think it sort of makes the documentation more Fusion-y. But yeah, and of course, here's what it looks like on some larger code blocks. Yeah, And of course, light theme, there are some subtle color adjustments that go on with the theming. Not too big of a change. It looks visually identical, but there are actually some colors changing there. So the background gets a bit brighter and some of the colors get shuffled around a bit. But yeah, you'll notice, hopefully this is relatively nice and easy to read. So yeah, that's basically everything I'm willing to show right now. It's not the most in the world. I still have lots of writing ahead of me in order to finish this, but I am very confident in this new direction. I think that the new tutorials will be much more understandable and much more to the point. The new design changes should really help you read the page. And I mean, of course, we have a couple new features here as well. We have instant navigation. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but the page no longer refreshes, so you're not going to get the flash of unstyled content that you might have been used to before. We've got lots of technical changes under the hood. Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. So I'm hoping to get this up and running alongside Fusion version 0.2 when that comes out. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will be talking more about Fusion over the coming weeks. And yeah, I'm going to keep on working on these documentation pages. I will see you in a bit. Have fun.